He used to stare into mirrors, not to admire himself, but confirm he still existed. Some people look for truth in the eyes of others. Narcissists look for it in reflection, because mirrors never argue back. There's something almost divine about control, the power to shape how the world sees you, the ability to dictate which version of yourself they remember. And for a certain kind of mind, that illusion becomes oxygen. They don't crave love the way others do. They crave reflection, adoration that bounces back exactly the image they've built, polished, perfected. It's not affection they seek, it's validation. The silent applause that tells them they're winning the game of perception. But here's the tragedy. Behind the mirror, there's nothing. Just echoes of what people once said, what they once believed, what once made them feel powerful. Strip away the reflection, and the narcissist collapses, because their identity never existed without witnesses. The mirror was never glass. It was people, and people eventually crack. Narcissism doesn't start with pride. It begins with emptiness. A child who was praised for performance, not for presence. A son who learned that being good meant being noticed. A daughter who realized that love only arrived when she shined. So they build a mask, beautiful, invincible, admirable. And behind it, they hide a simple fear. If they see the real me, they'll leave. That's the curse. Every compliment feeds the illusion. Every silence threatens it. They begin living for applause, terrified of the quiet that follows. Because in silence, the truth returns, and the truth is unbearable. You probably met one. The colleague who takes credit for everything. The lover who makes you feel invisible. The friend who only listens when the topic is them. They walk through life as if spotlights follow them and shadows don't exist. But the truth is, the spotlight is a prison. It blinds them to everything real. They believe they control the world around them. But in truth, they are controlled by the very image they created. Every decision, every smile, every word, they all serve one master, the mirror. And when that mirror cracks, when admiration fades, they panic, they rage, they crumble. Because narcissists don't break quietly. They destroy the room before admitting they're wounded. There's a strange beauty in their pain, though, a kind of poetic madness. They aren't evil, they're empty. They aren't heartless, they're starving. They love to be loved, but they've forgotten how to love back. They speak of loyalty, yet flee at the first sign of indifference. They chase perfection, but it's never enough, because perfection can't fill loneliness. And what they fear most is being ordinary. So they compensate. They exaggerate. They craft stories where they're always the misunderstood genius, the victim, or the hero. Anything but human. Because human means fragile. And fragility terrifies them more than death. You see, narcissism isn't just arrogance. It's addiction. Addiction to attention. Addiction to admiration. Addiction to the belief that control equals worth. But the more control they seek, the less peace they find. Because true control requires love, and love demands surrender. And surrender is something they cannot do. They build entire empires out of performance. Relationships become stages. Conversations become negotiations. Even kindness becomes a transaction, something given only if it feeds their image. It's not that they don't understand empathy. They understand it too well. They mimic it with precision. They know what tears look like, what warmth sounds like, what love feels like to others. But when it's their turn to feel, it's hollow. They're fluent in emotion, yet strangers to feeling. If you've ever loved a narcissist, you know the pattern. At first, they make you feel like the most important person alive. You're seen, adored, elevated. You start believing you finally found someone who understands your worth. But slowly the warmth fades. Compliments turn into criticisms. Questions become accusations. Your identity begins to blur, replaced by their version of you. Something they can control, define, and own. That's how they feed. Not through cruelty, but through control. They drain you with smiles, not screams. And when they leave, it's never with closure. It's with confusion. Because that's how they stay alive. They want you to keep thinking about them. They want your thoughts to orbit their absence. For them, even hatred is attention. Silence is death. In their mind, relationships aren't about connection. They're about reflection. They see you as a mirror that must never distort their image. The moment you do, when you question, when you stop admiring, when you start seeing them clearly, they shatter you, not because they hate you, but because they can't stand the version of themselves reflected in your disappointment. And that's when you realize something haunting. They never loved you. They love how you made them feel about themselves. Narcissists often mistake fear for respect, admiration for love, and control for safety. They build walls so high, they mistake isolation for superiority. They convince themselves they're independent when in truth, they're terrified of dependence. They walk with confidence, but it's rehearsed. They smile with warmth, but it's conditional. They speak of truth, but live in performance. They've mastered every emotional language but their own. And at night, when the world stops watching, they stare at the ceiling and whisper questions they'll never admit aloud. Why do I feel so alone? Why do I need them to see me? Why can't I just stop pretending? But the mask answers for them. It says, you can't stop now. They're still watching. Some of the most charming people you'll ever meet are narcissists. They know how to listen just enough to make you open up. They know how to compliment you just enough to earn your trust. And they know how to make you depend on them emotionally, so that leaving feels like losing a part of yourself. That's the trick. They don't steal your heart. They make you hand it to them. And once you do, they use it as a mirror until it cracks, and then they discard it, not out of malice, but out of fear. Fear of being seen without their reflection. But every narcissist has a breaking point, a moment when the applause stops, when their control slips, when someone finally walks away and doesn't turn back. That's when the truth creeps in. And it's not the truth they tell others. It's the one they've avoided all their lives. They realize that power without intimacy is emptiness, that admiration is temporary, and that the love they've been chasing has always been imitation. They look around and find no one left to mirror them. And for the first time, they face what they've always feared, themselves. In that moment, the narcissist stands before the real mirror, not one made of people, but of silence. And silence doesn't flatter. It doesn't applaud. It only reflects what's real. At first, they resist it. They call it depression, betrayal, even injustice. But silence is patient. It waits. And eventually, the mask begins to slip. They start remembering who they were before the applause. The child who wanted love, not admiration. The soul that wanted peace, not perfection. And maybe if they're lucky or broken enough, they start to change. Not into saints, but into something real. Because beneath every narcissist is a forgotten human being. Someone who once just wanted to be seen, not worshipped. But not all find redemption. Most rebuild the mirror, stronger this time, shinier, colder. They call it growth. They call it maturity. But it's just another mask with better lighting. And that's the danger of narcissism. It doesn't end with awareness. It evolves. It adapts. It learns how to disguise itself as humility, spirituality, or success. Some even start preaching about self-love, while feeding on the same admiration they once craved. They mistake attention for healing, applause for progress, followers for friends. And slowly, they forget again. Machiavelli once wrote, "It's better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both." But what he didn't say was, fear is lonely and love built on fear is fragile. The narcissist learns this too late. They spend years mastering control, only to realize it's control that costs them everything real, because love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability means surrendering control. That's the paradox. The stronger they appear, the weaker they feel inside. The more they manipulate perception, the less they understand truth. And in their pursuit of being adored, they forget how to be alive. The narcissist's tragedy isn't that they love themselves too much. It's that they never truly learn how to love themselves at all. They love their reflection, the edited version, the idealized self, but not the one who existed beneath the flaws, the fears, the insecurities. And until they face that reflection without flinching, they'll keep repeating the same cycle. Charming, conquering, collapsing. Every one of us carries a fragment of them. That need to be admired. That desire to be right. That quiet hunger to matter. We all want to be seen. But when the need to be seen becomes more important than the truth of who we are, that's when we begin to lose ourselves. Maybe the difference between us and the narcissist isn't the presence of ego, but the ability to question it, to look in the mirror and whisper, I'm not perfect, and that's okay. Because true confidence isn't built on control. It's built on acceptance. And real love of self or others doesn't require a spotlight. It only needs honesty. The mirror never lies. It only reflects what's already there. The danger begins when we stop seeing reflection as truth and start mistaking it for identity. So look again, not to judge, not to admire, but to remember. You are not what they see. You are not what they say. You are not the mask you wear to survive. You are the quiet between the applause, the part that stays when the world stops watching. He wasn't cruel. He was calculated. To the untrained eye, Adrian Vale looked like the perfect man, composed, rational, articulate. But behind every nod, every smile, every measured breath was an equation. He didn't speak to connect. He spoke to calibrate. Every word was a move on an invisible chessboard. People called him charismatic. Some called him cold. But the truth was simpler. Adrian had learned that emotions were liabilities, and trust was a currency too expensive to spend. He believed in one law. The world isn't fair. It's strategic. And strategy doesn't reward the honest. It rewards the aware. The first time Adrian understood power, he was 10. His parents were fighting again, screaming in that familiar tone that made the walls feel alive. His mother cried. His father left. But Adrian noticed something. The louder they got, the less they listened. So he stayed quiet, silent, observing. And when his father turned to him, expecting fear, Adrian smiled instead. The man froze, confused, disarmed. For a moment, Adrian had controlled the chaos without a word. That night, he realized something profound. People don't follow truth. They follow control. Years later, the boy became a man whose silence could command entire rooms. At 29, Adrian was already a rising executive at a global firm, the kind where words like ethics were written on walls, but never followed in boardrooms. He watched colleagues gossip, compete, and pretend to care. He learned who lied, who flattered, who feared. And while they all fought for recognition, Adrian played a quieter game, the Machiavellian game. He understood that people rarely think logically. They think emotionally, then justify it later. So he made emotion his weapon. To make someone trust him, he gave them something first: validation, attention, admiration. Then he watched his gratitude turn into loyalty. To make someone obey, he didn't demand. He suggested. He let them believe it was their idea. That's the Machiavellian's brilliance. They don't force control. They guide it. But Machiavellian minds aren't born. They're forged. They're the result of watching kindness fail too many times, of realizing honesty gets punished and naivety gets devoured. Adrian used to believe in sincerity, but sincerity made him invisible. And in this world, invisibility is death. So he adapted. He stopped seeking fairness and started mastering leverage. He studied human nature like a language, one built on fear, ego, and need. He could read a face faster than most people could read a sentence. He knew when a compliment was manipulation, when a smile was strategy, when silence was power. It wasn't empathy. It was pattern recognition. In the office, people saw him as confident. In truth, he was detached. He didn't trust anyone, not even himself. His apartment was minimalist, silent, controlled. No photos, no memories. The only decoration was a glass chess set on his desk. He never played it. He didn't need to. Life was already the game, and everyone he knew was already on the board. One night, he was called into a private meeting with the company's CEO, a man named Rowan King, known for his charisma and cruelty. Adrian, Rowan said, leaning back in his chair, "You've got a mind I could use, but I need loyalty, not logic." Adrian smiled faintly. "Loyalty is logic," he said. Rowan studied him, then nodded, amused. "I like that." And just like that, Adrian was in, not because he was the best, but because he was the most useful. That's how Machiavellians rise, not by being seen, but by being needed. Over the years, Adrian became the silent architect behind Rowan's empire. He managed crises before they surfaced. He leaked stories before they became scandals. He made enemies disappear without blood, just a phone call, a rumor, a misplaced trust. To him, morality was just inefficient emotion. What mattered was the result. If it worked, it was right. He had no enemies, not because he was kind, but because he made everyone believe they were his ally. That's the Machiavellian paradox. You win trust by never trusting. You build loyalty by never needing it. But every mind built on manipulation eventually meets its mirror. For Adrian, her name was Elena. She was his colleague, sharp, intuitive, unreadable, the kind of person who looked through you instead of at you. He tried his usual methods: charm, flattery, subtle control. She didn't bite. She never reacted the way he predicted. He'd send a compliment. She'd ignore it. He'd withdraw. She'd remain calm. He'd test her. She'd smile like she knew the answer before he asked. For the first time, Adrian wasn't the one in control, and it unsettled him. Elena wasn't playing to win. She was playing to understand, and that terrified him, because understanding is more dangerous than power. One evening, after everyone left the office, she stopped by his desk. "You're not what you pretend to be," she said softly. He didn't flinch. "Neither are you," he replied. She smiled. "Maybe, but the difference is, I remember who I was before I learned to pretend." He didn't answer. He couldn't, because in that one sentence, she had described everything he'd lost. That night, he couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, his mind wasn't running numbers or scenarios. It was replaying her words. He realized that his intelligence, his precision, his emotional detachment, all of it was armor, not against failure, but against feeling, because feeling meant vulnerability. And vulnerability meant surrender. But surrender was something he'd forgotten how to do. Weeks passed. Rowan, the CEO, began to grow paranoid. Convinced someone was leaking information, he turned to Adrian. "Find the traitor," he demanded. Adrian did what he always did. Observed, calculated, controlled. But something was different now. The more he investigated, the more he realized the traitor wasn't outside. It was him. He'd become disillusioned, tired of manipulation, of playing God in a world that no longer made sense. He didn't care about winning anymore. He just wanted to feel something real. But in the Machiavellian world, emotion is treason. When Rowan discovered that Adrian had protected Elena, who was quietly exposing corporate corruption, he didn't shout. He simply said, "I thought you were smarter than this." Adrian smiled faintly. "I was," he said, "before I met someone who made me remember I'm human." Rowan stared at him for a long moment, then whispered, "Humanity is a weakness." Adrian nodded. "Yes, but at least it's real." He walked out that night. No chaos, no confrontation, just quiet rebellion. Months later, Adrian lived in a small apartment downtown, away from glass towers and politics. He'd started consulting independently. Fewer clients, more meaning, but the habits never left. He still analyzed people unconsciously, still saw patterns in everything, still calculated outcomes before they happened. Except now, he did it without malice. He'd turned strategy into understanding, not manipulation. That's the difference between a Machiavellian and a philosopher. Both see how the world works. Only one chooses compassion over control. One rainy night, he stood by his window, watching the city lights flicker across wet glass. His reflection looked older, quieter, but more human. He looked at himself again, not because he loved what he saw, but because he couldn't stop checking if others still did. Every morning, his reflection became a battlefield between the person he thought he was and the mask he had built to survive. They called him confident. They called him magnetic. But no one saw how every compliment was a lifeline and every silence a wound. He smiled, the same perfect, practiced smile, but inside, he whispered the same question he asked since he was 6 years old. Would they still love me if I stopped performing? Narration begins, the wound. The narcissist is not born. He's manufactured, carefully, painfully, through years of invisible hunger. When he was a child, love was never given freely. It had to be earned through grades, obedience, or charm. Affection was a transaction, not a language. So he learned early that beloved, he had to shine. That love would vanish the moment he stopped being special. And slowly, something inside him split, the real self and the one built for applause. That's where the ghost was born. A ghost that smiles when dying inside. A ghost that says, I'm fine, even when drowning in its own reflection. Seeing to rise. Years later, that child became a man, admired, envied, unstoppable. He had the kind of charisma that filled a room, the kind of confidence that made people mistake control for strength. In business, in love, in life, he won. But every victory felt like air, because a narcissist doesn't chase success. He chases proof. Proof that he exists. Proof that he matters. Proof that he's not the forgotten child who once waited for approval that never came. And when people stopped clapping, he created new stages, new victims, new mirrors. She loved him once, truly, deeply, not for his image, but for his eyes when he wasn't performing. But that terrified him, because love meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant the return of the pain he swore never to feel again. So he did what narcissists do best. He pulled her close to prove he could win her, then pushed her away to prove he didn't need her. And when she finally left, he told himself he let her go. But deep down, he knew she had left long before that. The moment she saw that his love was never about her, it was about him not feeling small. The narcissist lives in a palace of mirrors, every wall reflecting the same face back at him. Every friend, lover, or follower becomes a reflection of his need to be adored. But the tragedy? He doesn't know how to love his reflection, only how to control it. He will charm you. He will study you, your fears, your dreams, your triggers, and feed you exactly what you crave. Not because he wants to understand you, but because he wants to own the version of you that worships him. And when you no longer feed his ego, he will discard you like a mirror with a crack. Because to a narcissist, cracked mirrors remind him of the truth, that beneath the perfection lies an empty, unseen child still waiting to be held. There comes a day when the mirrors stop working, when people stop believing the performance, when the spotlight fades. That's when he meets his greatest enemy, silence. No applause, no validation, just the echo of his own voice asking, who am I if no one's watching? He tries to rebuild. New friends, new faces, new lovers, but the ghost behind the smile whispers. They'll all leave once they see what's underneath. He can't silence it, because that ghost isn't his enemy. It's his truth. The world calls him selfish, manipulative, but they never ask why. Why does someone become addicted to admiration? Why does someone need to be worshipped just to breathe? Because when you've never known unconditional love, control becomes your only form of safety, and validation becomes your drug. The narcissist doesn't want power. He wants protection. He doesn't crave attention. He craves certainty. And every cruel thing he does is a desperate attempt to never feel powerless again. Seeing the encounter, one night, he met someone who didn't care about his charm. She saw through the armor, and for a moment, that terrified him more than anything else. Why don't you admire me? He asked. Because I see you, she said, not the version you show the world. You. For the first time in his life, he couldn't speak. He felt naked, not in body, but in soul. And for a fleeting second, he wanted to be seen more than to be loved. The next morning, he stood before the mirror again. The same face, the same smile. But this time, he noticed the cracks. He didn't fix them. He didn't hide them. He just stared and whispered, maybe the cracks are where I start being real. The ghost goodbye. The narcissist never truly disappears. He learns to coexist. He learns that admiration is not love, and control is not safety. He learns that the truest mirror isn't the one that flatters. It's the one that reflects you when no one else is watching. And maybe, just maybe, the ghost behind the smile finally finds peace. not by being adored, but by being understood. There are two kinds of pain, the kind that burns you from the outside and the kind that you carry like an invisible weight, quiet, heavy, and endless. She lived with the second kind. Her apartment was filled with other people's ghosts, voices she'd comforted, hearts she'd stitched together, souls she'd kept alive when she was falling apart herself. She had a gift, the kind that sounds holy until you realize it's a curse. She felt everything, every sigh in a room, every heartbreak that wasn't hers, every emotion that didn't belong to her, yet lived inside her like it did. And one day, she asked a question all empaths eventually whisper to themselves. If I can feel everyone else so deeply, why do I feel so empty? The world calls them healers. But no one tells them that healers often bleed in silence. Empaths are the opposite of narcissists. Where one builds walls to protect themselves, the other tears theirs down just to make others feel safe. But here's the paradox. When you keep absorbing everyone's pain, you start losing your own shape. You forget where their sorrow ends and your soul begins. She used to think her sensitivity made her weak. Now she knows it's what makes her human, but it's also what nearly destroyed her. He came into her life like most people do, broken but pretending not to be. She saw his pain before he even spoke. It lived in his eyes, the kind of pain that hides behind confidence. He said, "You understand me more than anyone." And she smiled, not realizing those words were both a compliment and a sentence, because the moment she understood him, she became responsible for his happiness. Every fight she fixed, every silence she filled, every wound she bandaged, even when a knife was still in her own hand. And when he finally left, she didn't hate him. She hated herself for not being able to stop loving someone who only came to borrow light. Narration, the mirror of pain. Empaths attract the broken, not because they choose to, but because brokenness recognizes safety. They're the mirrors that reflect what others hide, the quiet presence that says, you can fall apart here, but what no one sees is what happens after the mirror is gone, after everyone's pieces are whole again, except the empath is. Because when you keep saving people, you forget that saving yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. Seeing the collapse. It happened one night, quietly, like most breakdowns do. No tears, no screams, just exhaustion that went beyond sleep. She sat on the floor, surrounded by photos of people she used to heal, faces smiling in the light she gave them. And for the first time, she whispered, "Who heals the healer?" Silence answered. And in that silence, she realized something dark yet freeing. No one was coming. And that was her chance to finally come for herself. Narration, the awakening. The empath's journey isn't about feeling less. It's about feeling without losing yourself. It's about learning that love isn't measured by how much pain you can carry, but by how much peace you can protect. For years, she thought boundaries were walls. Now she knows boundaries are doors that lead back to your soul. She started saying no, and the world called her selfish. But she smiled because they didn't know how many times she said yes when it destroyed her. Weeks later, she met someone new. He didn't ask her to fix him. He didn't need her light. He had his own. And for the first time, she realized what love was supposed to feel like. Not an ache, not a rescue mission, but a calm recognition. You don't complete me. You meet me. She didn't fall in love to escape herself anymore. She fell in love to share herself. Finally whole, finally free. Empaths are not saints. They are warriors of emotion, fighting invisible wars every day just to keep the world humane. They break, they bend, they cry, but they never stop believing that kindness still matters. And even when they've been betrayed, they still choose to feel, because they know a world without empathy is a world without meaning. Now she wakes up and breathes before she listens. She loves without losing herself. She gives without guilt. She feels, but she no longer bleeds for those who won't heal themselves. Her sensitivity is still there, but now it's not a wound. It's wisdom, because she learned the most painful truth of all. You cannot save people from drowning if they're not willing to stop swimming toward the storm. Empaths don't need to feel less. They just need to feel themselves first.